I didn't even realize it was a skill until it kept me breathing. It started with a noise I couldn't explain, low, steady, and way too close, but something in me just clicked, a reflex I never trained for, and that's the only reason I'm standing here, able to tell you what really happened that night. I don't know what it was exactly, instinct maybe, or something older than that, the kind of thing that doesn't show up until your skin knows before your mind does, but I ducked. That's all I did. I dropped down and held my breath. And I think that's what saved me. Back up a bit. 3 nights earlier, I was fixing a leak in the supply closet at the clinic where I work or used to work. I'm not a doctor or even a nurse. I was the night janitor, quiet gig, mostly just floors, bathrooms, restocking gloves and masks, locking up. You don't talk much on that shift, which is what I liked about it. The clinic's a small building off Route 12, half a mile past the Petromart, no traffic at night. Just the occasional long-haul truck or drunk kid trying to find their way back to town after a bad night. So when you're inside, it feels like you're the only one awake for miles. Peaceful, in a way that starts to feel a little eerie if you're not used to it. That night, the one where everything started, I was mopping exam room 3. There's a window that overlooks the back lot, but we keep the blinds closed. I heard a sound from the hallway, not a bang, not even a footstep, more like air moving, like someone opening a door very slowly. But the thing is, I'd already locked everything. I paused, didn't say anything, didn't move. That's something you learn working nights. Not everything needs your attention right away. Sometimes a noise is just a noise, sometimes it isn't. 5 minutes passed, maybe more. No other sounds. I convinced myself I'd imagined it and went back to work. I finished the floors, did a walkthrough, checked all the doors again, all locked. Alarm panel said everything was secure, so I left. 2:17 a.m., like always. Next night was normal, boring even. But when I came in, I noticed the first thing that felt wrong. The air smelled different. Like something stale had been opened after a long time. Not foul, just too still. Like the difference between a lived-in house and one that's been empty for weeks. And yet, lights were on, charts were stacked on the nurse's station like always. The coffee machine had half a pot still sitting there from the afternoon shift. I didn't say anything. Who would I say it to? At around 1:50, I went to take out the garbage. That's when I noticed something in the alley. A streak about shoulder height running along the brick wall, like someone had dragged something wet. I checked it out. It wasn't blood, I don't think. Too thin, and no smell, but it wasn't water either. It was just off. I took a photo, but it didn't show up well. Flash killed the detail. I figured maybe a pipe had burst nearby or a kid had played some stupid prank, so I left it. That was the second night, third night, the one I started this story with. I parked behind the clinic like always. The wind was louder than usual. And for the first time I had this feeling that someone had been sitting in my chair before me. Not that anything was out of place, just that kind of animal sense, like someone had been right where you are now, still air but somehow charged. And then came the noise, that low, steady sound, not quite human, not mechanical either, not something I could place. I heard it before I'd even turned the key in the janitor's closet. My body just dropped before I knew why. That's when I heard the click, sharp, like a boot heel or something metal hitting tile, not fast, deliberate. I stayed down, didn't even breathe. I was on the floor behind the receptionist's counter for maybe 30 seconds before I dared look up. What I saw wasn't a person. I mean, I think it was a person, but the way it moved didn't track, too smooth, like it wasn't walking but gliding a few inches above the floor. But the shadows didn't line up. I saw legs, then none, then legs again. Like light didn't want to touch it. I didn't move, didn't blink, just waited until the sound faded. I stayed there for 2 hours. Eventually, I crawled out the back, got in my car and drove home without even clocking out. Next morning, I called the day manager and quit. Said my mom was sick. She's not, but something happened in that building. Something I don't think I was supposed to see. And something, I don't know what, kept me alive. I didn't even realize I was doing it, but later that day I looked it up. Turns out there's this breathing technique used by spearfishers to slow their pulse and oxygen use. I used to do it when I was a kid, just messing around holding my breath underwater. I hadn't thought about it in years, but that night behind the desk I was doing it without realizing. My body remembered, and maybe that's the only reason whoever or whatever was in that hallway didn't hear me breathing. I haven't told anyone this, not even my sister, and I don't plan to. But last week I drove by the clinic, just to see. The windows are boarded up, place shut down, no warning, no sign, but there was one thing different, the alley wall. The streak was still there, only now it's longer, wider, and it goes all the way to the ground. I know what you're thinking, maybe it's a chemical leak, mold, maybe something someone spilled and it reacted weird in the rain. I thought of that too. I tried to forget it, to rationalize every piece of it. I even convinced myself that I'd just had a sleep-deprived panic attack. But then I started dreaming of that hallway. Not once, not twice, night after night in the dream, I'm back behind the counter, same exact spot, but the building isn't quiet anymore. There's a hum, like fluorescent lights buzzing too loud, and I hear someone breathing just outside my line of sight, not moving, not speaking, just breathing, long, controlled, unnatural, like someone imitating a human breath pattern without understanding how lungs work. And every time I dream it, I wake up with a dry mouth, heart pounding, like I've been holding my breath in real life. I tried talking to a therapist about the anxiety, left out the specifics. She asked if I had any trauma from work. I said no. She asked if I had panic attacks. I said maybe. She gave me a worksheet and said exposure helps. I didn't go back. Instead, I went online, searched for weird things at the clinic. Nothing. It had been there since 1996, changed owners twice, nothing in the news. No lawsuits, no accidents, just one weird Yelp review from 2019 that got deleted. Something's off in exam room 3. The lights flicker when no one's moving. My daughter said she saw a man in the mirror, only no one was standing behind her. The nurse laughed it off. I didn't. I saved the screenshot. That review vanished 2 days later. About a week after I quit, I got a voicemail. The number was local, no name. It was a woman's voice, soft, calm. She said my name first and last. And then you were in the building at 2:17 a.m. on the 18th. We need to speak with you. Please don't ignore this. No callback number. Just that I checked my phone history. No trace of the call, nothing in my carrier log either. I let it go, or at least I tried. 2 days later, I saw something in the parking lot of my apartment, right by the dumpster. At first I thought it was just trash, wet paper, maybe a grocery bag. But when I walked closer, I realized it was a single latex glove, half melted, the kind we kept in the clinic's back storage. It wasn't there the night before. No one in my building works in healthcare. I checked. That night the dreams got worse. They weren't just visions of the hallway anymore. Now I was outside the clinic, looking in through the blinds. I could see myself, me, inside, standing in front of a door that shouldn't be there. A steel one with a keypad, no markings, no frame, just built into the wall like it had always been there. And I was about to open it. But in the dream, I always wake up before I do. I know this sounds like fiction, like something you'd read on a creepypasta subreddit. But this isn't that. I'm not writing to scare you. I'm writing because I need someone to know what I found, in case I disappear like everything else that's touched that building, because I went back. I didn't want to, but it's like something in me needed to know, needed proof. Not just the dreams, not just the voicemail or the glove, something more. So I waited until a rainy Saturday when no one would be around and I parked across the street, same lot the nurses used. The whole building had been shuttered for months, windows boarded, doors chained, no signs, no paper notices, just silence. But the alley was open, and the streak on the wall, it was different. It didn't look like a streak anymore. It looked like writing, not in paint, not in ink. It looked etched or burned, or maybe grown, thin root-like veins running from the top of the wall down to a strange shape near the bottom. A circle almost. A kind of rough outline, and here's the part one still can't explain. When I touched the wall it felt warm, not just warm from the sun, warm like skin. And then I heard it again, that same low noise from the first night right behind me. But when I turned around no one was there. I ran. Didn't look back, sat in my car until the rain stopped and the sky started to lighten. I didn't sleep that night. I haven't slept right since. The next morning I checked again. I drove back. In daylight, the wall was bare, no streak, no marks, just clean brick, like it had never happened. But I know what I saw, I know what I heard, and I know more than anything that there's something buried in that building that isn't meant to be found. I haven't told anyone this part, but a few days ago I started getting packages, no return address, no postage, just plain manila envelopes, inside Polaroids, grainy, dark, dated like they're from the 90s, all taken from inside the clinic. But the rooms aren't right. The walls are wrong, the angles don't make sense, there's no light source, and in the corner of each photo, written in red ink, "You saw too early." I burned the first envelope, tossed it into the sink, lit a match, watched the edges curl and blacken until it was gone. But the next one came 2 days later. Same size, same handwritten message on the back, "Watch carefully." This time I didn't burn it. I made myself look at each photo longer, really look, and I noticed something I'd missed before, a shadow. Barely visible, always in the far right of the frame. Same shape, same height, like someone was taking the picture but forgot to move their hand out of the way, except the shadow didn't behave like a hand. It was too tall, too narrow, and in one photo, the fourth one, the shadow had a faint outline, shoulders, a head, arms held stiff at the sides like it was waiting for something. Like it was listening. I flipped that photo over and there was another message, different handwriting this time, sharper and slanted. "It breathes when you don't." I don't remember sitting down, but I was suddenly on the floor of my apartment, back against the door, hands shaking. I left the envelope there all night untouched. The next morning, I made a decision. I went to the public library, not to check out books, just to think somewhere that didn't smell like bleach and fear. I grabbed an old microfilm reel from the archive room, stuck it in the reader, and told myself I was researching. But all I was really doing was avoiding going home. Around noon, an old man came in, sat at the next reader over, didn't say a word, didn't look at me. But after about 10 minutes he slid a small manila folder across the table, just slow enough that I noticed no name, just a small symbol on the front, a spiral with 3 dashes through it. I looked over. He was gone. Not in the aisle, not at the door, just gone. Inside the folder were 5 pages, typewritten. Old paper, yellowed at the corners. No headers, no dates, just dense text like a journal or some kind of record. The first line made me sit up straight. Patient 04D displayed abnormal silence between 02:00 and 03:15. No respiration detected. Visual confirmation negative. Sound of breathing reported by attending tech. I read the line 5 times before moving on. The second page detailed a room layout, nearly identical to the clinic's exam room 3. Dimensions matched. Placement of equipment matched. Even the window. But here's the thing, there was no mention of a clinic. The document referred to the place as Site Delta 4. Another excerpt stuck with me. When the subject became still, the atmosphere changed. Not colder, not darker, but quieter. As if the space adjusted to the absence of motion. We believe it only notices what moves. I copied every word by hand. Took me almost an hour. When I looked up, the original folder was gone. Like I'd never opened it. I biked home, took the back roads, watched behind me the whole way. The apartment was just as I'd left it, but the Polaroids were gone, not the envelope, just the photos. And in their place was a new sheet of paper, laid out perfectly straight on my kitchen table. It said, "You're starting to remember. That's good. Don't stop now." Thing is, I hadn't remembered anything. I hadn't forgotten anything. Or so I thought, but that night the dreams changed again. Now I wasn't just standing outside the door. I was inside it. No walls, no ceiling. Just a vast space that smelled like antiseptic and metal. Like 1,000 unopened hospital rooms stacked in the dark. And in the middle there was a chair. Empty, strapped down, facing nothing. But I wasn't alone. Something was breathing in there with me. Not fast, not loud. Just consistent. Like a clock with lungs. And every time I moved it got closer. That's when I realized the truth, or at least a piece of it. It wasn't hunting me. It was watching to see if I remembered how to be still. I woke up with blood on my pillow. Nosebleed. Bad one. I'd bitten my own cheek sometime in the night. I didn't go to work that day. Or the next. I didn't even leave the apartment. But each day another envelope showed up, always with new photos, always with new writing. Messages like, "You were trained without knowing. This is how it chooses. Quiet isn't safe." Still is. And then a photo that changed everything. It was the clinic. But not recent. This photo was clearly decades old, maybe 80s or early 90s. Different cars, old signage, but the weird part was what stood in front of it, a group of people, maybe 10 or 12, dressed in white scrubs, faces blurred, not from motion but from damage. Like someone had smeared them out of the print with a hot finger, and in the center was a man I recognized instantly, because it was me, same face, same eyes, but I've never worked there in scrubs. I've never taken a photo like that. I didn't even move to this town until 3 years ago. But it was me, same mole on my cheek, same scar above the eyebrow, no question, and beneath the photo just one line handwritten in neat, perfect script. "You came back twice already, but now it's staying with you." I didn't sleep after that. I left the apartment lights on all night. Sat on the floor with my back against the wall, knees pulled to my chest like I was 13 again, hiding from my father's rage. I kept replaying that photo in my head, my face on someone else's life. My smile, in a time I don't remember living. And yet, the longer I stared at that image, the more something inside me started to itch. Not physically. Deeper than that. A mental scratch. Like I was on the edge of remembering something I'd buried on purpose. Not trauma. More like a decision. The next day, I checked the town's archives. Our city isn't big. Around 60,000 people, one newspaper still in print, one reporter who covers everything from council meetings to farmers' markets. I found an article from 1997. Tucked in the back of the digital microfiche under Community Health and Safety. The headline read, "Renovations at local clinic reveal unused sublevel, no records found." The article was short, 3 paragraphs, no photos. It said that during routine upgrades to the plumbing, contractors had discovered a previously undocumented door beneath the main exam hallway. The door was welded shut. The clinic's director at the time claimed it had been an architectural oversight, likely planned as a storm shelter and abandoned during construction. The space was sealed off again. No follow-up article, no names quoted, but what caught me was the date, February 18th, 1997, the exact same day I'd been there. 30 years later, at 2:17 a.m., And now I couldn't ignore the numbers anymore. 18th, 2:17, same timestamp I always clocked out. Same time the breathing started. That night I stayed at a cheap motel just off the highway. Old school, single story, buzzing neon sign, room key still a literal key. I didn't tell anyone where I went. Left my phone in a drawer at home. Brought only my journal, the copied documents and the envelope with a photo of me. At 3:14 a.m. I heard knocking on the door. Not banging. Not the kind you hear when something's urgent. Just 3 slow, heavy knocks spaced out. Like whoever was on the other side had all the time in the world. I stayed completely still. Didn't breathe, didn't move, that same reflex again, like my body remembered something my brain hadn't caught up to yet. The knock stopped, but a shadow passed across the window, not a full figure, just the top of something tall, too tall, gliding past. I didn't open the curtains until dawn, no one was there, but someone had slid something under the door, a folded page from a field notebook, graph paper, torn on one side on it, a hand-drawn floor plan, the clinic, but not the one I knew. This version had 3 sublevels, not one. Hallways that didn't exist, exam rooms labeled with codes instead of numbers, 04D, 05R, 06X, and one room marked in red. Subject isolation, room 0. The hallway that led to it was labeled simply, the still corridor. That name stuck with me. I stared at the paper for hours, tracing the paths with my finger over and over. Something about the lines, the angles, the curves felt wrong, like the map was based on geometry that didn't exist, or wasn't meant to. Later that day I drove back to the clinic again. Not inside, just sat across the street in my car. And that's when I noticed him. A man, mid-40s maybe, wearing a maintenance jumpsuit with no logo, just standing near the alley holding what looked like a clipboard. Not moving, not taking notes, just watching the building. Same as me. I waited, he didn't. After maybe 5 minutes he turned his head. Not toward the clinic, but directly at me. Like he'd known I was there the whole time. He smiled, a slow, tired smile. Not friendly. Not mocking, just inevitable. Then he held up the clipboard and turned it around. I couldn't see what was written on it, but I recognized the shape drawn in thick black marker. The spiral with 3 dashes, same as the folder from the library. By the time I blinked, he was gone. I don't mean he walked away. I mean he wasn't there anymore. No car, no footsteps. Nothing, just the alley. And the shadow on the wall, that streak again. But now it was different. It wasn't a streak or writing. It was a door, not real, not physical, but an outline, a suggestion, like my eyes were being tricked into seeing something that wasn't quite there, or was, but only if you already knew where to look. I didn't get out of the car. I drove home in silence. Didn't turn on music, didn't check my phone, just stared at the road and tried not to blink too long because I kept feeling like if I blinked too slowly I might open them and not be here anymore. That night I didn't sleep, not out of fear, but because I was finally remembering something. A noise low, steady, from a long time ago, and then the face, my face but younger, staring up at something I couldn't see, smiling, and then total silence. I started keeping my apartment cold, not just because I couldn't sleep, but because I noticed something else. The warmer the room, the more the air felt off, like it was too thick, too full, like I wasn't the only one using the oxygen. I turned off the heater, slept in layers, left the windows cracked even when it rained. It wasn't about comfort anymore, it was about control. About keeping the space mine, but even that didn't last. The envelopes kept arriving, and then they changed. Instead of photos, I started getting transcripts, typed pages, sometimes 1 paragraph, sometimes 10, all undated, all labeled with initials and numbers I didn't recognize. T.04E03B, H.00, no context, just voices or what sounded like voices recorded in text. 1 read, subject redacted. Transcript begins. I know it watches, I know it waits. When I'm quiet, it slows. When I breathe too loud, it flinches. But if I speak, if I ever speak, it remembers me. Silence 0018. The door in the wall wasn't supposed to open. They said it would hold. They said it was sealed. But I watched the lock turn and no one touched it. Silence 0247. It took the sound out of the room, like it swallowed it. I couldn't hear my own heartbeat. I still can't. Transcript ends. Each transcript ended with the same word stamped at the bottom. UNCONCLUDED. I must have read that one 20 times. I started writing them down in my own notebook, copying them word for word, like it would make them real, or maybe make them stop. It didn't. One night I came home and the chain on my front door was latched from the inside. I live alone. I waited a full hour in the hallway thinking maybe, somehow, I'd just forgotten. That I'd been home earlier, that I'd locked it myself, even though I hadn't. When I finally went in, everything looked untouched, except for one thing. My old camera. I haven't used it in years. DSLR, cracked screen, busted focus ring. I only kept it out of nostalgia, but it was sitting on the kitchen table. Powered on, 1 photo loaded. I picked it up and looked. It was a picture of me, taken from across the room. No flash, just the grainy glow of my laptop in the background and me sitting on the couch, head turned toward the window like I was hearing something. The timestamp read 2:17 a.m. I turned off all the lights, sat with the camera in my lap and waited. That's when I noticed something I'd missed in the photo, a reflection faint in the glass behind me. A shape not tall, not looming, but crouched like it had been inches behind me, perfectly still, waiting. I left the apartment that night and never went back. Stayed in a motel by the train station for 3 days, didn't sleep, barely ate, just watched the door, the corners, the reflections in anything that held light. On the 3rd day, a knock at my window. I was on the 2nd floor, not loud, just soft, deliberate, like someone tapping with a coin. I didn't look, just pulled the curtains shut and sat against the opposite wall. That night I dreamed again. But this time it wasn't the clinic, it was a train station, empty, fluorescent lights flickering overhead, and I was waiting on a bench alone. But I wasn't afraid. I wasn't panicking. I was humming a tune I didn't know, or maybe one I'd forgotten, low, steady, and from the far end of the platform something was humming back the same rhythm, the same pitch, echoing softly in the dark. When I woke up, I was on the floor, mouth dry, nails dug into my palms, and there was a new envelope under the door, inside a torn piece of audio tape, flattened and sealed in plastic. No label, no message, just one word written in faded blue ink. Remember, that was the day I broke. I drove to the edge of town, left my car near the old reservoir, walked 5 miles up the ridge trail to an old fire watchtower nobody uses anymore. I climbed to the top, sat on the floor and screamed into my jacket until I couldn't make a sound, and when I finally stopped, everything went quiet, not just quiet, silent, no birds, no wind, no creak of the tower, nothing, and then I felt it again. That pressure, like the air was watching me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the transcript I'd brought with me. The one labeled T.04, I unfolded it and read the last line aloud. It took the sound out of the room. And just like that, the silence ended. A gust of wind hit the tower hard. The whole frame shuddered, and from below I heard footsteps on the stairs. Slow, deliberate, wood creaking under real weight, but I didn't run, I didn't hide, I just sat there, breathing steady. Like my body remembered something even my mind still couldn't. And then the footsteps stopped, right below the trapdoor. A pause, then a voice, soft, level, almost kind, whispered, "You're almost ready." When I opened the hatch, no one was there, but the air smelled like the hallway, and the sky above had turned completely still, like the wind had never existed. I came down from that tower slower than I should have. My legs were shaking, not from fear, but from something else. Like my body had finally caught up to the weight of all this. Like it had been holding its breath for days, maybe longer, and the muscles were only now realizing it could exhale. I didn't go back to the motel. I didn't go back anywhere. Instead, I drove out past the old quarry. The place locals used to swim before someone drowned in '98 and they closed it off. There's a single stretch of dirt road past it, full of potholes and pine needles, that leads to a small cabin that used to belong to my uncle. No cell service, no power unless you bring your own generator. But it was quiet, and that's all I needed. I stayed out there for 9 days, ate canned food, slept in my coat, wrote every word I could remember, every detail, every image from the dreams, every phrase from the envelopes, every name and number and floor plan from the documents I still had, because I'd started to realize something. The envelopes weren't just warnings. They were instructions, not direct ones, nothing as clear as go here or do this, but a sequence, a rhythm, a language hidden inside patterns of stillness and sound. And it was only when I finally stopped fighting that rhythm, when I accepted that it had already chosen me, that I started to see the message inside it. The breathing wasn't random, it matched mine. Every time I slowed down, every time I stopped moving, every time I tried to disappear into silence, it mirrored me, which means it learned or it listened, or both. On the 10th morning at the cabin, I woke to find someone had left something outside the door, not an envelope this time, a box, small, wooden, no lock, hand-carved pattern on top. The same spiral I'd seen before, only now the 3 slashes weren't through it. They were beneath it like roots. I opened it. Inside was a cassette tape. No label, no writing, just black plastic and a short hand-tied string of twine wrapped around it. And beneath the tape a folded map, not of the clinic, of me. It showed everywhere I'd been for the past 4 weeks, dated, annotated. Red lines marking each location, the alley, the library, the motel, the reservoir, the tower, and all of it drawn by hand. At the bottom of the page, one sentence, "You've completed the circle. Now choose your silence." I didn't understand it at first. Thought maybe it was a metaphor, a threat, some kind of psychological breakdown manifesting itself in poetry. Until I played the tape. I had to borrow an old player from a pawn shop in town. Told the guy that first was digitizing music for my dad. He didn't care. just wanted $30 cash. I sat in the parking lot and pressed play. Static then, my voice not like a recording of me talking but me breathing, steady, calm. And then slowing, then silence followed by a sound I've never heard outside of nightmares, like a throat clearing but stretched out, wet. Too low to be human, too deliberate to be animal. Then the voice not whispering this time, clear, full like it was sitting in the seat next to me. You survived because you were made to. Don't pretend otherwise. Click, tape ended. I didn't rewind it, didn't even eject it. Just left the player in the seat, got out of the car, and walked to the curb. Stood there, watching the sky, trying to find something I could trust. A bird, a cloud, a plane, anything. But the sky was still, and I knew what I had to do. I went back to the clinic. Or what was left of it. The boards had been ripped off the windows. The back door, the one by the alley, was wide open. Hinges rusted and bent like someone had forced it with more than tools. No sign of the streak anymore. No writing on the wall, just a smell like time had been held too long and finally let go. I walked in without turning on a light. Not that there was power. The place was dead, but room 3 was waiting. Everything in me said not to go back in there, that if I crossed that threshold again, I might not leave this time. But that part of me, the voice that told me to hide, to hold my breath, to listen instead of speak, it had grown quiet, and I understood now. I hadn't been hiding from the thing, I'd been sinking with it. I stepped into the room, and everything stopped. The dust in the air, the sound of my shoes, the pulse in my ears, like the room folded in on itself. And then across from me, in the mirror above the sink, the one that was always fogged, always crooked, I saw myself. But older, eyes sunken, shoulders hunched, wearing the same clothes I had on now, only stained, faded, like I'd been in them for years, and that version of me. It smiled not kindly, not cruelly, just like someone who'd been waiting a very long time for me to catch up. The reflection raised its hand and I raised mine. Perfect sync. It opened its mouth, slowly, deliberately, and spoke just 3 words. Do you remember? I didn't answer out loud. Something deeper than thought told me not to. I don't even know if I could have spoken in that room. Not with the way the air felt, like it was pressing against my vocal cords, flattening my breath before it even left my chest. But in my mind I heard the answer echo anyway. Yes. And the second I thought it, really thought it, the mirror changed, not shattered, not faded. It peeled like a film being lifted from glass, revealing something that had always been underneath. And what I saw wasn't a reflection anymore. It was a hallway, long, narrow, dim, lit by a kind of cold silver glow that didn't seem to come from any source, just light with no origin. The walls weren't brick or tile or drywall. They looked like they were made of layers, of soundproofing foam, of fiberglass, of cloth and metal pressed together so tight that no sound, no breath, no footstep could pass through. And in the very center of that hallway, facing away from me, was a chair, the same one from my dreams, strapped down, empty, waiting. I don't know what made me do it, but I reached out and touched the glass, half expecting it to be cold, expecting it to push back. It didn't. It passed through me. Or maybe I passed through it, and suddenly, I wasn't in the exam room anymore. I was standing in that hallway. The floor was soft, too soft, like walking on memory foam soaked in water. My footsteps made no sound, not even a hint of weight, and behind me nothing, no mirror. No door, no way back. I walked. Every step forward felt like a breath I hadn't earned, like the space around me was deciding whether I was real enough to continue. And the silence. It wasn't absence, it was alive. It noticed me. By the time I reached the chair, I understood something without needing to be told. This wasn't a trap. It wasn't even a test. It was an invitation. The chair wasn't meant to restrain. It wasn't for punishment or control. It was for alignment, because something inside this place, inside me, needed to remember what it meant to be still enough to listen back. I sat, and the world shifted, not violently, not even quickly, just realigned, like gears clicking into place after years of being ground down. And then around me voices began, hundreds, thousands, all speaking at once, but not talking, breathing. Each breath was unique, some shallow, some labored, some perfectly steady, but together they formed a kind of rhythm, a network of lived moments layered into a pulse, a heartbeat made of everyone who'd ever passed through silence and survived it. And one voice rose above the rest, my own, but not from my mouth, from somewhere deeper. A memory so buried I didn't know it was mine until it spoke. When you learn to disappear without dying, you become the doorway. That's when I remembered everything. The first time I came to the clinic, not months ago, not years ago, but before there was a clinic, before the town had a name, before I even had a face. This place, it wasn't just a building, it was an echo chamber, a place built around an anomaly that wasn't physical, something acoustic, a phenomenon tied to resonance, to biological stillness, to the act of hearing without input. That breathing I'd heard, it wasn't chasing me, it was mirroring me, trying to find the one frequency, the one presence that wouldn't break the loop. And somehow, over lifetimes, I'd been part of that loop more than once, each time forgetting, each time waking up again in some new version of myself, drawn back toward this place by instincts I didn't understand until it was too late. But this time was different. This time, I remembered before the door fully closed, I opened my eyes, really opened them, and I was back in my apartment, same couch, same coffee mug on the floor, same sound of the fridge buzzing faintly in the background. But everything was still, not quiet, still, like the entire world had paused just long enough for me to catch up, and on my chest, folded neatly, was the final envelope, no name, no spiral, just a single word on the front, now. Inside, nothing, just air, and somehow I knew the story wasn't over, because I wasn't just the one telling it anymore. I was the one recording it, the breath it mirrored, it was mine. And now that I remembered, it would follow someone else, someone who hears the noise, someone who holds their breath without knowing why. Someone like you. I kept the last envelope in my drawer, didn't lock it, didn't seal it, just left it there, untouched, unburned, unburied, not because I was afraid of what might happen if I destroyed it, but because I knew it didn't belong to me anymore. It wasn't for me. Not really, it was a marker, a handoff. Because whatever this thing is, this rhythm, this silence, this presence that latches onto stillness and waits for someone to remember, it never ends. It just moves, it waits in the empty spaces, in the breath you forget to take, in the hallway you glance at too quickly, in the moment your body tenses without cause. You think you're being paranoid, you're not. You think you imagined the sound. You didn't. You think you're alone when the room goes quiet. You never are. I left town a week later. No forwarding address, no phone. I paid cash for gas. Slept in my car when I had to, changed plates twice, erased every trace I could of who I'd been, not because I thought I could outrun it, I know better now, but because I needed to become unfindable, not for my safety, for yours. Because once it recognizes your pattern, your rhythm, your unique silence, it begins to sync. It learns you like a melody. And once it knows your tune, it doesn't need you to come back. It can find you anywhere. I don't know where it goes next, but I know what to listen for. That low, steady hum just beneath the noise of the world, the rhythm that doesn't belong. The breath that's not yours. And if you ever hear it, in a clinic hallway, in the reflection of a window, in the pause before the next knock, don't run, don't scream, don't move. Just listen, because you might not realize it yet. But your body does. And if you're lucky, really lucky, something in you will click, a reflex you never trained for. And maybe, just maybe, that'll be the only reason you're still breathing tomorrow.